Now, do you struggle to find an interesting landscape subject to paint? Very often, artists are a bit jaded when it comes to their immediate surroundings, maybe their neighborhood or even their town. And it's not a real help to find sort of strange looking reference photos online that don't look real. We all know that problem these days. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a strong landscape painting from scenes that you're probably very familiar with. Not only is this going to help you identify and observe a subject like an artist, but it's going to give you a lot more painting pleasure. So the big idea is that a good landscape painting does not depend on a spectacular subject. We must remember the real subject is light, shadow, and value structure. Now have a look at this photo reference. Maybe it looks exotic to you, but to me this is an everyday scene from my neighborhood. And it inspired me to take a photo of it because it had such good strength in the scene. I saw the shadow pattern, the light, the shapes of the trees, the direction of the roadway, all the compositional elements and what was necessary to create a strong painting were contained in this scene. But it is also just an everyday scene. Now I'm going to cover a few points in this video and then take you through a basic demonstration of how I turn a scene like this into a strong landscape painting. Now painting outdoors is a lot of fun and I love plein air painting. There's just one thing I'd like to add though, especially when it's a bit cold or you need a little break and a pick-me-up, and that would be a nice hot espresso. But when you're painting outdoors, where are you going to get an espresso? Well, that problem has been solved by our sponsor of this video. Notan has created a portable electric espresso machine. The Nano Espresso machine. This little gadget will not only give you an espresso anywhere, it'll also be nice and hot. So let's see if this little gadget is going to give us a nice espresso when we're painting outdoors. After painting outdoors for a while, it's always great to have a little coffee break. The Nano Portable Espresso machine weighs just under 700 grams and heats up in just 200 seconds. You get rich crema with 92 degrees Celsius water at 20 bars of pressure. Whether you use ground coffee or capsules, it's built to European standards and charges via USB or car charger. And there's our cup of espresso. Espresso while painting outdoors. I mean, what else do you need? I must admit, I really enjoyed that cup of coffee. And if you're a coffee nerd like me and you want to get yourself one of these machines, there's a link in the description with a discount for you as well. Enjoy it. So the second important point here is that I'm using the afternoon light to create a much more dramatic scene. Late afternoon light creates longer shadows and strong value contrasts and warm highlights. We got the cool deep shadow, we got the strong light, we got the shapes being revealed very easily, and it's quite simple to understand the value pattern. The third point is looking for the big value structure. I try to convert the scene into basically three groups: dark mass shapes, secondly the middle values such as the road and other foliage, and then the light values such as the sky and highlight on the grass. With all of these three values in play, the painting or the scene gets a very strong structure. We've got the road creating a leading point into the scene and a shadow pattern across the road. So we've got the cool shadows and then the bright warm light across parts of the road and then further shadows after that. So we've got this sort of pattern where the eye can move from one shape to the next and enter the scene. There's also interesting shapes within the shadows as well, and we can try to bring that out with little color temperature changes. The fourth important thing to do is now to design the painting around these mass shapes. We've got to identify the dark shapes, the middle value shapes, and the light shapes. Now in the coming demonstration, I'm going to show you how I arrange these shapes, starting with a basic Notan structure and then into a small color study. And this is part of a process that I teach in my course, Learn to Paint with Impact. It's all part of a process that hopefully becomes second nature and will help you observe and create much more compelling landscape paintings. So having a look at the reference, we want the light and shadow shapes. That's the big idea. Look for those, and you can see the big shadow pattern here, the lights over here, and compare it to your Munsell value scale. You see the lights on this side, and then the shadow family of values here. So I'm going to start off with a Notan study, and this is just a very basic 3-value graphic representation of these elements. I'm using Copic markers. I've got 3 in those value shades, but I'm only going to need the black for the 3-value Notan and a middle value gray. That's the N5 Copic marker. So starting off with the black for the big darkest darks and this middle value shadow pattern, and obviously the white of the paper is forming the lightest light. And you can do several of these studies. Then we're going to try a different Notan study, and I use the Notan as a map to start off my painting. Big broad strokes with the felt tip marker, kind of like a painting brush. And that's really the idea. I'm incorporating the hillside in the distance and the shadow pattern in the foreground with a bit more of a pattern for the lights, and maybe show a few light patterns through the trees as well. Now moving on to a color study, and this is a bit of card that I have gessoed. It's actually canvas stuck on a card, gessoed, as well as put a red tone over it. And using a big brush, I'm going to make the big dark shapes. I've got the reference photo and I've got my Notan studies that create a little map for me to follow. And the color study is just a small, as the name suggests, a small color study using paint colors to explore the subject in a bit more in depth and learn about the subject, learn about the value structure, the shapes, the patterns, and how to paint that in a way that's going to create a more interesting painting. And as I said, learn from the exercise, because then I can take this forward into a larger painting if I like the subject. If it resonates and I see potential, I can take it further in a larger version. So now I'm mixing up a shadow color for the road in shadow, of course. Just a bit of alizarin, some cerulean blue, and some white. And of course, the colors I'm using are my standard palette of, and by the way, you can always check your values as well. So I think I just need to make that slightly darker to ensure that it's in the shadow family of the value scale. So my palette is my standard palette with titanium white and 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues. Usually a lemon yellow and a yellow deep, a cerulean blue and ultramarine blue, a red light or red medium, and alizarin crimson. You can add burnt sienna and yellow ochre as well. So the lightest light, obviously, the sky. And I've used titanium white and a touch of yellow for added warmth. It is a warm scene, and you've got to remember that you don't make it look cold by just using plain white, which is really a cold color. Now the light on the grass, mostly yellow lemon or yellow light, a little bit of titanium white. The light on the road, I'm going to use white, a touch of yellow, and alizarin crimson. Sort of a warm, lightish pink, I suppose. And create a pattern here between the lights and the shadow. And this gives the scene a lot of punch, impact. That's what we're after. We're creating an impactful painting of light. And because we've got all the cool shadow, our warm lights really stand out even further. Here I'm creating a little bit of temperature variation, a slightly warmer sidewalk area, and a similar idea to show some of these shapes in the trees and give them a bit more form. I'm using a number 6 long flat brush here, so not small brushes, even though the shapes are getting a little smaller. So all I'm doing now is adjusting the big shape patterns that I've put down initially. Not reaching for a tiny brush to paint in little details. Yes, at the end I will add a figure, hopefully, and that can be considered a smaller detail, but ultimately the landscape has got to stand on its own through its shapes. And now I'm creating a little bit more light in the road back there. But it's a case of just finessing the patterns that we've already established. This is the important principle. It's not to add details now and clutter the painting with all sorts of things. Little subtle changes in color temperature add interest, like I'm doing here in the shadows. It's still remaining a shadow, but I'm softening some of the edges of the tree against the sky and suggesting different shapes within the value structure. Just lightening up that distant hillside to make it a bit more atmospheric. It is a light, it's just influenced by all the atmosphere, so it's going to be very cool. Here I'm working in the shadow area, so I've got to make sure that all these little adjustments keep the general shape a shadow shape. That is the primary concept, and by creating a strong and simple pattern of light and shadow, we create an impactful painting, one that gets a lot more attention than one that is filled with superfluous details. Just finessing the shape, give it a little more interest, slight visual cues, but not losing the structure, not losing that strength. Same thing with the lights on the road over here, thickening up the paint a little, refining the shape, just making sure the edges are nicely done. A little one at the end there. Do I want to make this light really pop and stand out from the background? Well, try it out. Put down a strong touch of yellow. If it's too much, you can just get rid of it or reduce the size of it. Bringing the shrubbery forward a little on the right-hand side. Suggest some tree trunks. There are a few small ones catching some light. So I generally put them in, and if it looks a bit busy, I will reduce them or get rid of them. Now I'm going to add a little figure for a touch of human interest and scale. And I find that is probably all I really need here. I'm just going to add a little more impasto in the lights. I'm going to get rid of some of these highlights over there. Maybe create a sky hole or two. Just downplay it a bit more. But as I said, this is a color study. It's for learning purposes and to figure out your subject and see where you maybe like here, these little halos on the treetops. Could be a nice feature to add in a larger painting. And so we discover where we're going with a color study. Now I've done a slightly larger version, and let me know if you'd like to see that in a future video. I'm going to just brighten up that sky as well. So that's pretty much it. That's a color study, and I think the painting has some interest to it after all. Well, I hope this has given you some ideas and a bit of inspiration to look at your surroundings with another viewpoint. And instead of looking at an everyday scene that you've seen 1,000 times, try to look at it from the point of view of an artist and identify 3 values: lights, middle values, and darks, and then identify shapes and put those together to create a strong sense of light. We're always painting light after all. If you want to explore this idea even further, have a look at the free painting lesson up here, and that's going to introduce you into the whole idea of Notan paintings, and then maybe join me on Learn to Paint with Impact. Also, don't forget the upcoming Create Art magazine, the next edition coming out on the 2nd of July. You don't want to miss that, so grab a free subscription at createartmagazine.com. And finally, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss more important painting lessons like this one. All right, until next time, happy painting and cheers for now.